So I am thoroughly enjoying Marvel's Moon Knight. As someone who grew up reading Rick Riordan's mythological stories and have a major that encompasses the mythologies and cultures of the past, I like a good piece of media that mentions it, and I had the idea to go through the show and talk about certain aspects. The idea isn't to go in and say, so this is completely wrong, this is not true. It's more of a, oh, how do they implement this? And to be honest, as long as it's not an Ancient Aliens movie or a documentary, I'm good. Before you ask, hi, I'm Wheezy. And Wheezy, what are your qualifications?
I can read and write ancient Egyptian, and I can decipher hieroglyphics and hieratic.
Actually, I don't know hieratic. I have yet to learn a second form of the Egyptian language, but still, let's go. So the Ennead are traditionally Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Keb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys, and sometimes Horus as the son of Osiris and Isis. If you count that, my friends, that's 10 people for a word that means 9. In the show, Hathor is also added into the mix, and you're probably wondering if this was deliberate. And if you ask me, yes, they made this decision consciously. Because a big surprise, everyone, the Ennead members are different depending on where you are in Egypt. Ancient Egyptian history is at least 3,000 years old, and depending on what local cult you had, there was probably a different myth or creation myth, because myths are supposed to explain national phenomena. In fact, sometimes Isis, Osiris, Set, Nephthys, and Horus are siblings, and there is a version of the myth where they were born on the last 5 days of the year, and Nut had to create 5 days of the year because she wasn't supposed to see her husband. It's a really weird myth. Interestingly, this is also the myth that Khonshu is involved in, because Tot wanted not to be able to have her babies because she was cursed to not have them under 360 days, so Tot challenged Khonshu to a game of Senate so that he would gather enough moonlight for 5 days of the year. Hence, the 5 last days of the year were created. It's hard to keep track of all of them, and it's not definitive, but there are certain aspects of each myth that are the same. So let's go with the version that the show has constructed for the story.
Up the old nozzle and all the organs would come out except for the heart.
Now, the act of pulling the brain out of the nose is called exciseration. It was done by punching a hole in the bone near the nose with a chisel, and then they would turn the dead body on its side, and they would go up with a hook. It is a hook, but it's not a big metal hook, or privy to what the mummy says, it also wasn't a really hot rod. It was actually made out of a plant-based material. I'm going to show you the name of the plant because I have troubles pronouncing it. This hook would then help with liquefying the brain by, wiggle it around a little bit, and sometimes you would also get chunks of brain. It's very, very graphic, I know. The other organs are not pulled out of the nose, unlike what Stephen said here. Organs are pulled out of an incision on the body, mostly on the sides. The incision depends on which period we're in ancient history. To note, a lot of the sources we have on mummification aren't from ancient Egyptians themselves, but from people outside of the culture, such as Herodotus. There is some material that was left behind that can help us understand how it was and what was done, but the full process and what actually happens is up to medical knowledge or experimental archaeology. The scarab. Well, since I didn't have the platform to actually say what the inscription was, and not that I do have a platform now, and New Rock Stars already had 2 Egyptologists tell them what's on there, it's not new information that the scarab has an inscription from the Book of the Dead. What I would like to add is that when I first saw it, I thought it was a heart scarab. Most of the scarabs I know don't have the inscriptions on the body, but rather on a smooth surface underneath, as it gives better room to scratch on the hieroglyphs. They can be used to send out messages, i.e. the announcement of a marriage, for example, the scarab announcing the marriage of Amenhotep III and Queen Tiye, that was then sent throughout the kingdom. Hilariously, if you gather up all the scarabs, you'll end up seeing some deviation in the way things were written, because scribes get lazy.
I'm taking a nap!
You want to take a nap?
I'm taking a nap here.
Okay, take a nap right there then. Good night!
The heart scarab entered funerary context as a way to protect the heart so that when it comes to the final judgment, during the weighing of the heart ceremony, their heart won't speak out against them and allow them to continue in the afterlife. Okay, so when it comes to reading hieroglyphs, first of all, it's not hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics is an adjective, and if we're talking about the alphabet, it's hieroglyphs as a noun. That's the one thing I'll be picky about, I'm sorry. They're not the easiest thing. Not because of the writing, but more because of the grammar. Since it is a Semitic language and what we have of the language is only a mere skeleton, we no longer know how things are pronounced. It is lost to the sands of time with only Coptic and other ancient languages that may have written down what it could have been for us to find out how it once was. Hence, whenever you hear someone on the show speaking in ancient Egyptian, it's just us pronouncing the words with a bunch of E's added for pronunciation reasons, and also more or less with our own pronunciation and phonetics. In episode 3, actually, Arthur says something in Egyptian, but since I don't have the hieroglyphs in front of me, I can't necessarily decipher it, and I'm pretty sure it's in Coptic, and either way, I don't speak Coptic. Let's take TR for an example. It can be tree, it can also be tire. It can also be tray if you have the terrible honor of a scribe who hates their eyes, as they tend to be dropped like the ne in the nepa of French. It's like playing Wordle, just that you don't know how many letters you need. But no fear, learn your unilaterals, the double phonemes, the triple phonemes, your pronouns, both the independent and the suffix pronouns. Your prepositions are important too. The verb order is verb, subject, object. Unless you have an independent pronoun, then it's subject, verb, object. That's the very short gist of it. There's a lot more behind it. When you see an Egyptian word, we have the phonetic components, and then sometimes there's a determinative to tell us what this word is supposed to mean. These are the verb forms in short, the relative forms being the bane of my existence. These are the negation forms, and then you're good to go, I guess. Grab a friend while translating hieroglyphs because it's an adventure best done in a group. Certain things are hard to understand because we no longer have a native speaker of ancient Egyptian running around, though there are still some Coptic speakers out there somewhere. I suggest reading some literature texts, especially those texts that have already been translated, transliterated, and so forth. You know, the whole Avatar thing's giving me Kane Chronicles vibes. I love it. I gather the idea of having a human being the host or the avatar of a god comes from the idea that the king is supposed to represent Horus. I actually love how in the Kane Chronicles this is also used to explain the different creation myths, but that's a topic for another time. They'll get their own video when Netflix makes that TV show or movie they promised us. Fun thing is, there's actually research being done on this, on astrophysics and chronological dating. I'm not well versed in this area, and it's certainly a very small niche. However, there is an astrophysicist by the name of Rita Gauci who, in example, used moon data from the Ilahun archives for the chronological dating of the Middle Kingdom. So it is a whole study field, and it's very interesting to look at. Is it weird for me to say that I am somewhat an expert on mummies? So mummies were wrapped differently throughout ancient history, and surprise, you can date them from the way their coffins are made, what kind of funerary objects they had, and how they were wrapped and, to put it lightly, decorated. To me, they look like they're from the Greco-Roman era, and it's not too far off since Layla mentions the Stundenwachen text, and sadly, I can't tell y'all anything about the Stundenwachen text, not because it's not published or anything. Even worse, there is a publication that goes into deep detail about what the text entail and the whole linguistic literature things behind it. But I have no access to such things because it's the holidays, the text isn't digitalized, and the library is closed. So what do we do when we can't reach our desired text? We read a review on it. Anyway, the Stundenwachen text, from what I read, has been around even before the Greco-Roman period of Egypt, but came into customs during the late period, so around 323 BCE to 624 AD, so around the late period. The goal of the text is to keep the dead safe, to purify them, and to help them live again or be reborn. It's mostly about the embalming ritual and wailings. This is all I got from the review without actually having read the text itself, and I apologize profusely, but it's the holidays after all. Librarians need a break too. Now back to the mummy wrappings. They remind me a lot about a mummy that's in the Louvre Museum, and it also has these peculiar patterns on their face. The one in the Louvre Museum is an adult who lived during the Ptolemaic period, hence the late period, in ancient Egypt. Now during this period, the wrappings became more important than the preservation itself. A lot of the mummies are in very bad condition, but the outside looks fantastic. But I would like to add that not all of them were wrapped with this horizontally wound bandage. Adding to that, a lot of the mummies from this period are astounding to look at, as the likeness of the Osiris, so the person that has died, is painted on the wrappings itself. So an Enchepti is someone or something who answers when there's a job to do in the afterlife. It's like a little servant of yourself. It's supposed to embody you. So the Osiris. Usheptis came to style around the Middle Kingdom. That's a really weird thing to say. Yeah, funeral customs and styles. Yeah. Anyway, not all Usheptis were pretty. We can see a difference over time and how they started out. An example, these stick Usheptis that were found at a children's burial ground that also had tiny little coffins. And quite often they had the name of the person that has died on them, since it's supposed to be you. Anyway, comments, questions, and critiques are welcome. Like and subscribe if you want to. I'll be here for the next episode of Moon Knight or the next 2 episodes, depending on how much I have to work with and how much time I have to research such things, as this is a good way for me to hone my research skills. And maybe next time I'll be able to talk a little bit more about the Stundenwach text, but until then, have a lovely week, drink a good ashuchu, and wait for the library to open up after the holidays are over.